There are times in politics when you think you'd be happy if the earth would just swallow you up, and I'm sure Chief Minister Alf Cannan might have thought that at the July sitting of Tynwald. Back now from a refreshing summer break, he's raring to go and keen to deliver on his government's much-discussed plans and strategies. But 2 years on, is there any substance to the glossy brochures? With the government conference taking place in less than a fortnight, there are some great debates lined up and opportunities to question key government figures. So why does the Chief Minister think we should attend?
Well, this is a new initiative that we put in place, an initiative that we created with the team that was sponsoring me effectively to be Chief Minister, and adopted then by the Council of Ministers that we should give a go at having a proper conference, a political conference where the government had a chance to explain its policies, its future policy thinking, but also to allow participation from the community and to give the community a chance to perhaps get up close and personal, if you like, to ministers, MHKs, departments when it came to future policy. And clearly, we are limited to a certain degree what one can realistically put into a conference, in inverted commas, for an island of 80,000 people, and obviously limiting factors as to how many can get to certain events during a daytime. But nevertheless, it's the second year of running this. It's been a new initiative that we've put in place. I felt that we got some good traction with last year's conference, and we've committed to running it again. It cost, I think the overall cost was about £31,000 for running it last year, and I think given the platform that it gave, we feel it's been a project that is worth running again. And then clearly we will review it at the end of this conference and see how much public uptake there has been, and of course how much benefit has been delivered as a result of it.
And it is a new thing, and perhaps a bit surprising that it's a new thing for the Isle of Man. In the UK, you have party political conferences that take place, and various policy ideas are discussed at those conferences. So it's surprising perhaps that it's taken us so long in the Isle of Man to do something similar.
Well, they can be quite inspirational. So I've clearly had the opportunity to go to the party conferences, if you like, and this is where the idea has sprung from. We don't have political parties per se, so the structure of the conference, if you like, is not necessarily set out on particular policy definitions or themes, but we are trying to open up an engagement process where current government thinking is open to some sort of scrutiny, open to explanation, and also open to engagement. And I think what trying to do is to try and make it a conference that does allow for criticism of government policy, or debate, if you like, constructive debate around government policy, and for new ideas to be floated as well, and to hopefully pick up on those ideas from guest speakers, or to get individuals who are not connected with government to give an overview of their particular perspective of different areas of government policy. So I'm trying not to make it, if you like, a sort of pro-government delivery tick box exercise, but to try and evolve it into a more realistic opportunity for the public to engage, as I said, with ministers for an explanation about policy, but also trying to hear as well alternative views about how things could be done differently.
There has been some discussion on social media that has been spotted by Manx Radio. I think it was Claire Christian and Chris Thomas, basically saying that it's moved away from the important stuff and it's more about government spin and waffle now. But basically what you're saying is you would disagree with that.
Was that spin and waffle coming from Mr. Thomas, was it? I think I think the conference has got the main themes covered. Clearly, as I said, it's impossible to cover everything. I think we have tried to attach themes to the conference. I'm conscious, in the two conferences, is yet one of the big issues, although it does get a bit of coverage, is healthcare. For example, this conference includes an element on education. It clearly includes the vital element of government finances and the economy, and also concentrates on our brownfield site programme. And, there's some side rooms where there'll be a chance to question me and other senior ministers at various points during the day and a half or so of the conference. And, I think it will tackle a number of key issues. It won't address every single issue, but it's almost impossible to try and meaningfully fit issues in, and we're trying to add some substance to the opportunities that are presented both to the public, to guest speakers, and to departments and ministers to, strike the right balance, but also have meaningful discussions and hopefully outcomes from the areas that we're looking at from the conference programme.
I admit I'm a political nerd, and I enjoyed the conference last year, and particularly enjoyed the fact that effectively we appeared to be listening to genuine policy debate, the sort of debate that I would have been familiar with primarily behind closed doors in either Council of Ministers settings or in the department setting, where similar debates and discussions would be taking place. But the innovation here is that it is being done in the public domain. Is there any risk associated with this? Because, of course, government necessarily has to make tough decisions and make choices, and a discussion at the conference may well be going in a particular direction, but ultimately you have to decide to go in a different direction.
Yeah, I think this isn't a voting conference where policy is voted on and determined, as you might find in one or two party conferences, for example. But and clearly, with some of the issues that are alive, if you like, some of the live political issues of the day may bring in strong alternative views and feelings. And it's clearly then, something that perhaps a minister or the Chief Minister or other senior politicians may wish to factor into their thinking. But I think the important thing is, we've tried not to shy away from addressing the critical issues, and some issues do result in people having quite strong views against perhaps what the direction of travel is. And it's right that people should have that opportunity to express those in the right forum. And I hope it's going to be a constructive couple of days for everybody, and we will hear varying views. And as I said, people will have a chance both to question and to talk to, I hope, senior ministers at some point during the conference. And of course, it'll be interesting to hear what some of the guest speakers have to say and the perspective they can bring. And that can be quite inspirational as well, because it does bring a different perspective, both from a government side of things, but also from those who are perhaps listening and are more closely engaged from an Isle of Man perspective.
So what's different about this year's conference?
Well, I think the differences were, so we've got an evening. So we're really going to kick the conference off. There's two key differences on the first day. First of all, we're going to devote the first morning to a youth conference, and we hope that will provide our A-level senior students with the opportunity to look at future opportunities for them, and perhaps we're just working out how we can also use that to get some youth perspective on the way the island is developing and the government's island plan is developing. So that's the first new innovation that we will do. And then we will kick the conference off on the Wednesday with a focus on education, but that is an evening session. And I hope that by moving it into the evening slot or the early evening slot, that we will then perhaps encourage wider participation, acknowledging that parents may be interested, teachers may be interested, other people in the educational system might be interested, particularly in that overview and the platform that we're giving to the education department to talk about how education may shape itself into the future and what plans we have from a strategic perspective to enable better outcomes in that area. So those are the first couple of innovations, and then on to the Thursday. It's probably a more standard format from last year. A lot of the focus is around business, industry and brownfield site development, and of course hopefully public will be interested in that, because often perhaps people don't pay attention until something then happens in their area. It will also give an indication in terms of how the economy, what will drive a lot of the sort of domestic economy, if you like, of some of these infrastructure plans that we've got do come to fruition. But clearly it's perhaps a slightly different audience at its heart, in terms of maybe a greater appeal to those directly in business and in that sort of domestic economy, who may find a tangible reason to visit the conference. But of course, everybody's welcome, and I hope as many people who are free and have an interest will determine to come along. And by the way, Phil, I just want to make clear that it's free to enter, and of course you don't have to stay for the day. You can come along for half an hour, you can come along for an hour, and even if you just want to come along and see how it's shaping up and want to give some feedback, then that would be hugely welcomed as well.
You've obviously learned from some of the criticism from last year. Particularly, one of the criticisms was that there were two daytime sessions. There wasn't as much in the evening. So perhaps another thing to learn for next time. I mean, you mentioned earlier, unlike UK party conferences, there are no votes. Any thoughts that maybe some issues could be debated and then a vote taken by the audience?
Yeah, listen, I mean, I think if this conference proves to have value and substance, and the feedback from people who are coming, that it is beneficial, that they've got something from it, they've felt it has delivered an opportunity, and that we are getting some benefit from it, then absolutely the way it shapes out for the future can be evolved and developed. It is, as I said, it's not always that easy to meet absolutely everybody's needs, and switching the whole conference into say two evening sessions again shortens the time scale available, and then the opportunity for people to explore other critical areas as well of policy and delivery. So we are feeling our way through this. As I said, we will have a better idea. I expect the conference probably to cost again £30,000 to £40,000. If it's not delivered that benefit, then we'll have to question whether we continue with it. But my hope is that it builds on last year's platform that was given, the successes that came out of last year's, and that we can continue to develop and evolve it, because I do think that from politically that the island does need at times a broader engagement process where it communicates, the political decision-making process and the political direction and the policies do need scope for engagement across the island. And of course our political system, in terms of the 5-year cycle that we had, the lack of party politics, does mean that I think the platform that we're offering here with the conference does offer some real opportunities for the future. And I'm not saying it's perfect, this is a second conference, but absolutely, if there are ways that we can develop it in the greater interests of delivering better outcomes and also ensuring there is a more engaged line of communication between government and the public, then I think it should be pursued and developed.
Moving on then to the specifics of the conference. There are three main topics, and we'll come back to some of these. Education and skills, finance and budgets we'll come back to. Housing and infrastructure. Now, you would think that if this was important enough to be a key topic at the conference, it would be important enough to have a new DOI minister and chair of the Housing and Communities Board. Any progress there?
Yeah, so there's almost certainly likely to be a new DOI minister appointed imminently. I think having had the opportunity over the summer to evaluate some of the current positioning, to put in place some plans to potentially reform the department, and I'll be bringing those forward to the Council of Ministers by the end of September, and Council will ultimately determine what they think is appropriate. That there will be a new DOI minister on board, I hope, and the housing programme will, I hope, at least by the conference, be provided with some greater clarity. I think it's been no secret that Council have determined to try and push this on now by sort of forcing the issue, if you like, around the creation of a housing association. I think a report has been prepared now by the Tolson Partnership regarding the potential for government in that respect, and council will now determine how best that can be taken forward. But yes, there will be provision, I hope, at the conference for us to have a very proactive discussion about how things can be driven forward on the island in a more efficient and effective way for the future. And I think it's clear to me that this model, which is widely adopted now across various regions across the UK, is proving far more successful and provides greater variety of housing options than what we're currently doing. So I would also hope to provide some clarity around how that will be taken forward from a political perspective, because clearly I'm not in a position to manage the DOI and housing and do my role as well. So yes, I expect those positions to have been defined by the time this conference takes place. So
the new infrastructure minister will be there, maybe not leading the debate, but certainly listening. In relation to the housing association, I know certainly in my time when we were looking at housing, the housing division at that time, I think it wasn't in DOI to start with. It moved in there. I can't remember where it was to start with. Anyway, wherever it moved from, it was felt that the DOI housing division, as it is now anyway, was pretty much everything that a housing association would be. So what is the difference between a housing association and what we've already got?
Well, I'm not really clear on why that necessarily was considered as a correct summary of the positioning, because as far as I can see, actually the ability of a housing association to raise funds, create a wide range of property structures, look at new innovation, particularly for first-time buyers, not necessarily just concentrate on social housing, but include within that a more holistic approach, right from sort of birth to grave, if you like, in terms of the housing options, but also enter into shared equity and other type schemes, and provide the real focus about delivering that with almost a professional board around it driving that forward, does distinguish itself from the potentially perhaps the additional bureaucracy of government. In other words, the business model, the financing of a housing association will differ from the way that potentially the government is approaching it, in that it will have I think the platform to raise funds against asset stocks and values, and not only just do that, but provide a greater objectivity and perhaps focus around how it also raises money from revenue from its tenants and from those who are utilising the schemes within the within the variety of products that the housing association is offering. Now, arguably, the DOI, could theoretically move to that type of position, but I think the evidence would suggest, Phil, from what I have seen, that even with the best will in the world, trying to do that within government probably would not allow the flexibility and the freedom and the focus that could be achieved from a housing association model being created. And then, of course, one needs to consider how that is reflected across the local authorities and the housing on the island. A lot of this, though, is still at an early stage. I really need to have a proper discussion now, imminently, and that will happen in the next week or so with the council of ministers about how they want to strategically take this forward, and that will be built on at the conference, at the Isle of Man Government Conference.
You're listening to Perspective with Chief Minister Alf Cannan. certainly the great strength of the Manx political system is the fact that you are all really very closely linked to the public. The general public has very easy access to ministers and indeed to their constituency MHKs. But perhaps that's part of the problem, and certainly, I mean, you was maybe you were alluding to this, maybe not, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but part of the problem that any department has is members are so involved in everything that perhaps it becomes impossible to do the things that maybe a housing association could have the freedom to do because of the political interference, members coming up with helpful ideas and suggestions, which then means that you get pushed off course from where you might have gone if you were purely looking at the housing issue from the point of view of sort of professional housing experience.
Well, possibly. I mean, I think the probably what's happening around us is that we're just not moving forward, and haven't embraced perhaps new ways of doing things, which are producing benefits for other parts of our neighbours in terms of the solutions that the local authorities and government are delivering for their communities. There's clear evidence in this particular circumstance that housing associations are working. They're working incredibly well. They are getting on and delivering a range of housing, and not only that, they're delivering modern standards and have the flexibility to determine what to do with old stock, and have a greater flexibility what to buy and what to sell and where to build potentially than the restrictions that you might find necessarily just within a government operation. I wouldn't so much blame the politicians, but of course, if we don't change the way we're doing things, then we just continue to repeat, if you like, the same mistakes. I think going back to the election, looking at the current position, now we know the tremendous pressures still remain on the housing market. We know the cost of housing is high for a lot of people, even though we are, I believe, successfully delivering a good, productive private sector house building programme. We're going to continue to do that in order to meet our demand, and I'm delighted to see some of the new developments that have been planned, particularly up in my neck of the woods, up in Derby, and also potentially developments for the north in Ramsey as well. But nevertheless, we've still got to make sure that we are continuing to keep this at the forefront of our minds. And I think that taking this forward, changing the way that we are approaching housing will mean ultimately, and this is what we've got to focus on, rather than the politics, we've got to make sure we're getting outcomes for society, will mean a greater choice of housing and will mean quicker delivery of new housing, for new lower cost housing for those who need it. And that's the important thing that we've got to keep focused on.
Do you think the people who were desperately looking for accommodation, whether that be rented or purchased, back in the 2021 the run up to the election, do you think that their options are any better now than they were 2 years ago?
Well, we've been building more houses, so we have brought more houses onto the market, if you like, and within that there's been a quota and quantity of first-time buyer houses, and a lot of those, admittedly, have been in the private sector. That will have eased some pressure, but I'm very conscious there's still a lot of pressures out in the marketplace at the moment. I'm conscious that rental properties, for example, are in very, very short supply. I'm conscious that to keep pace with our economic programme, the ambitions that we have for the numbers of people on the island, that we need to push forward at quite quick speed in terms of delivery. And within that, I'm also conscious of the fact that whilst we're doing a lot in the private sector, the current status within the public sector housing position really remains unclear, I think, in terms of the new developments planned and indeed how those will be funded. What I can sort of say is that, of course, these reports will become public. They are public, of course, paid for by the public. The latest report that I have does indicate that pursuing a housing association, even just for the government stock, could result in 500 new units being developed within a sort of 5-year period. And that, you can do that by effectively not drawing down directly on the Treasury funds, but by structuring finance around the housing association and the assets that it will have. So there are advantages, and I know that we can deliver better outcomes. So no, the problem hasn't gone away, still needs direction. Positioning a housing association has clear benefits. We can see the results that have been achieved in the UK. It's now really for the Council of Ministers to determine whether this should be embraced, and if it's not embraced, then how we need to take the housing forward. And I'll provide that critical piece of strategic approach, if you like, strategic policy will be provided at the conference, if not before.
One of my favourite little anecdotes in relation to housing, particularly in the public sector, is the fact that we have 5 housing authorities in the constituency of Rushen. Does that help?
No, I don't think it does, and I think and I know that various local authorities have slightly different approaches to housing and the way they look after their stock, but I think my view is, and some of this probably needs further work, but my view is that actually having that many different local authorities looking after different bits and pieces of stock means that we don't get any consistency in delivery. We also have overlap of costs which the public are probably unknowingly paying for, possibly through rates. There's obviously impacts on public funding when it comes to deficiency payments. So actually there's a big broader argument about consolidation in a lot of these areas and the benefits of doing so, particularly when it comes to the standard and quality of housing, and as I said, the options that are available to individuals. But I don't want to get too ahead now of preempting what the Council of Ministers view is now, because a lot of evidence is going to be given to them in terms of the work that's been done over the summer, and we will see where we go from there. I hope, as I said, at the very latest by the indicators be given at the government conference.
One of the other areas then that, we'll finish because we're still discussing housing and infrastructure, and one bit of the infrastructure role that isn't really covered by the conference is renewable energy, energy of any kind. I mean, in your government plan, the very first sort of bold statement talks about energy security for the Isle of Man. There are 3 issues certainly that seem to be vexing callers to the Mannon line at the moment, and those 3 are Kroger, the Ørsted development, and of course the onshore wind proposal. Now I must declare an interest. Obviously I may be affected by one of the sites in relation to the onshore wind, but on the other hand, of course, I pushed for years to try and get onshore wind developed. What can you tell us about those 3 areas of energy development?
So I think probably it is right to say that the onshore programme has clearer political delineation and potential outcomes in terms of what we have determined from a policy perspective, the minimum output that we are seeking from the Manx Utilities Authority, and the need to deliver it and to get on and get the island's renewable energy plans up to speed as quickly as possible, and the 2026 timeline that we'd put on to effectively bring this issue out into the open. I think obviously conscious of the fact that there is an exploration of sites that are going on at the moment, and conscious of the fact there is concern from various quarters about the sites that have been mentioned. The offshore renewable programme, as the Minister for the DOI, I've been looking at very closely over the summer. We are progressing now with Ørsted and continuing to discuss with Krogger their request for variation of licence. Again, it is my view that some of the governance around this needs to be tightened up. I'll be discussing that with Council in the coming couple of weeks. But we are committed to working with Ørsted to develop offshore wind. There are a number of matters that we need to overcome, including the regulation, including plans from the island for what role Treasury will play when it comes to taxation and any royalties, for example, and that's being examined at the moment. There's clarity that will be needed about access to market, because the main market will be the UK. We're not included in UK territorial sea rounds, so we need to work with Ørsted to understand more about how they plan to get their electricity into the main market. Building an offshore wind farm for the Isle of Man itself is not, as it currently stands, a feasible economic proposition for the private sector or indeed for the government. So we will be committed to working with Ørsted. So those negotiations are well underway, and they will be properly managed now into the future. And we've had a conversation as well with Krogger, and we are looking at determining and clarifying for them in the next couple of weeks how things should progress from there on the basis of their request to vary their licence and drill an appraisal well. Let's be clear about future energy security. Yes, of course, we've always run the risk with the gas pipeline that we've been susceptible potentially to some kind of unique global event, whether that be terrorism or whether that be war or other economic potential factors that may have involved threats to that supply chain. But equally, the stability of future interconnectors, whilst we believe that the UK will meet all its targets and will have in place the necessary infrastructure, still leaves us potentially exposed to other people's decision making. And we can provide at least that core base load, if you like, 25% or so of renewable energy on island, which gives us some additional energy security for the future. I think gives everybody confidence that we are, as an island, progressing in terms of meeting our commitments, but also that we are ensuring that the island's resilience for our future population, for future businesses, is given added weight and added substance.
One of the sort of carrion cries of the Cannan administration has been we need to embrace private sector development. What we are told is that there are several private sector renewable energy developments available on the island, almost ready to sort of just press the green button, but they're all being told that they can't plug into the Manx electricity grid because the grid just couldn't cope with the additional generation. Is it right then that we're apparently focused on spending money doing in the public sector what the private sector is ready to do, at the same time as we don't appear to have a clear plan or budget available to significantly upgrade the grid to allow for some of these renewable energy projects to feed in? At the same time, we're told that at a regular meeting of the architects, at the Manx Architects, they have expressed some level of concern about the ban on fossil fuel boilers, and have not received much by way of assurance from the MUA that the MUA the grid is going to be capable of supplying the electricity needed to power the non-fossil fuel boilers in the future. Is this possibly a kind of a cart before the horse situation, where what you really need to do, and what the Isle of Man government and particularly the MUA does best, is ensuring that the grid works for our future needs. Would that not be something that should be high on your list of priorities?
Yeah, I recognise that there are weaknesses on the grid, as I understand it, and just setting up a private wind farm, solar farm, and expecting just to put that onto the grid causes, at certain points, is complicated, requires the grid to be strengthened, and doubtless will have some consequences in terms of the overall management of electricity and its consistency, and it's the need to have that consistent supply at all times. I think the evidence that's been presented to us to date is that actually the best, most effective, cheapest option for the people of the island is for the government, for the state to do this. And actually, as a result of what we determine to do through the Manx Utilities Authority, will ultimately ensure that we have the access to the most cost-effective supply. How the private sector evolves in the future remains quite an open, challenging question. Phil, I don't have the clear directional answers for that at the moment. I'm very conscious of the fact that people want to do things, that they believe there are opportunities out there. But our focus at the moment is pushing forward our renewable energy security plans, or our renewable energy security plans for the island. And of course, alongside that, we've clearly said that part of that is not only onshore now, but also we need to put in the additional interconnector. And of course, if we subsequently end up with offshore wind, then of course there's going to be even greater benefits to our energy security and the delivery of energy on the island. There are many different views around this. I'm well appreciative of the fact that lots of people have lots of evidence about lots of different directions of potential travel. It's really fallen to this administration, I think, to make some really definitive decisions about taking this forward. It's vital that we do so, and we need to make those decisions, and we need to ensure that everything is put in place. It takes years often to bring some of this to fruition properly and consistently. There's lots of elements that need further clarification, as we know, but I do not want to find, certainly be a failure, our failure, if we did not make any progress in this administration and then gave the next administration a 4-year window to try and make sure that we had a proper energy we're delivering proper energy security, to the island for the future.
And part of this, and this does move us on. Sadly, we are running very short of time now, but this moves us on maybe to the finance and budget section. And you have the bold ambition of an extra 200 million income by 2032, and by golly, we need it. So the potential clearly for an onshore wind farm in terms of helping government meet the target of growing the income of the Isle of Man government by 200 million by 2032. I mean, you could be making, 15-20 million pounds a year from your renewable energy projects over the course of the next 25 years. That's going to go a long way to helping you deliver on that part of the government's ambition.
Well, clearly one can see benefits in terms of pricing from onshore renewables. Clearly, what one makes from that and what one needs to make then is dependent on sort of overall infrastructure costs of running the Manx Utilities Authority, and the positioning that the authority has around any previous debt or future debt that it may wish to incur. It's not government's plan or intention to build onshore renewables to meet our financial problems, if you like. I mean, I think we're taking a far greater strategic approach to that in terms of what we've set out around the population numbers, what we've set out around the number of jobs that we've needed to create, what we then will believe will happen as a result of the infrastructure that will need to go in place, the private sector infrastructure, the building, the brownfield sites, And that will ultimately lead us to delivering much greater revenue for the island. But it is, the Treasury Minister has got a challenging position on his hands, and that position hasn't gone away. We've yet to settle a lot of the public sector pay rounds. We know that the Treasury Minister set out £150 million deficit last year. The impacts of inflation on that will have changed the budgetary position for departments. So actually that platform will be a chance for both an external view of the Isle of Man's financial position. I hope a period of engagement from the Treasury about the challenges that they are facing, and some indications one expects about what solutions may be in place. But there's no direct link into renewables, and I wouldn't want to confuse the picture that somehow the government had determined, actually, if we get these renewables on, we're going to get an extra few £1 million in revenue. In any case, that's going to fit within the Manx Utilities Authority's business plan, and that will become increasingly clearer depending on the progress on these matters.
And are we expecting big announcements? You'll know whether there are going to be big announcements at the government conference in relation to that rebalancing of the government finances.
I think, I am expecting that we do deliver some platforms for people to see and understand where we are with the cycle of this particular administration. As I said, during this discussion, we've already alluded to brownfield sites and infrastructure potential announcements. I'm very much hoping we'll get clarity on that. I'm hoping that we will get clarity on the housing association model and the potential benefits that will bring, and which direction of travel is the preferred direction in that respect. And we'll be looking for discussion absolutely around the financial positioning, but also the Enterprise Minister will be giving us clarification around the plans for the development of the economy, not only the impact of that from any potential brownfield sites, but I'm sure what else is happening in terms of the investment that we're making to create jobs and continue to diversify our economy. And, I think the MUA may by then have determined potential site selection, and we may be in a better position to then carry on engagement around clarification around the island's onshore programme, and as well by the government conference I expect to have greater clarification made about our offshore programme and what is going to happen with the Crogger variation and how we plan to move forward together with Ørsted.
The other element then, the third element to the conference is education and skills. Maybe this is a bit of a cheeky question, but one thing that perhaps needs to be down there is a course on how your civil servants can become or fill the top positions of government. Do you not have faith in the Manx Civil Service? Because I know 3 senior appointments made this week, all of whom are from off Ireland.
And we've made open commitments to open these positions up, recruit the best candidates for the role. They've been entirely open to internal candidates. I know internal candidates have been considered, but the jobs ultimately have gone to people off island. I don't think, ideally I would like to see more development of civil servants coming through. It's vital that we do create, encourage and cultivate talent within the civil service, but I think we also must put in place the best people for the roles, and I don't think there's been any particular agenda followed. I think the processes have been conducted transparently and professionally, and we are where we are, and I'm delighted to see these new appointments happening. As you know, we've been undertaking quite a transition for various reasons across government over the last 12 months or so, and we are drawing to, I hope, a much better conclusion in terms of putting some sustainability or putting some solidity, if you like, around some of these positions which have been open for quite a while and have been filled on an interim basis. And hopefully now that we have the Chief Operating Officer in place, we've filled a couple of the other Chief Officer positions, and that I'm hoping that by the end of September now we'll have clarity on the Chief Executive Officer position, and then we'll be, I think, in a much better position to start taking things forward. And it has been a very tough period for government in many, many ways from a civil service perspective. I'm confident that we've got a really good group emerging, and that the government's going to be in a much, much better position once we've completed the recruitment of these main roles. And
a cynic might point out that the DHSC doesn't have a particularly good record with off-island chief executives. Presumably, your hope is that on this occasion it's third time lucky.
The role's evolved, it's changed, and since the Employment Tribunal, or certainly, as the tribunal has evolved, that the situation with DHSC, how it was managed before, and the new structures and things have changed. And I don't say for one moment everything's nice and easy. These are difficult portfolios. They've got a lot of critical delivery matters attached to them, a lot of governance and oversight. And of course, for anybody coming into those roles, I wish them the very, very best of luck. We're going to give everybody as much support and encouragement as we can, particularly in the early days, because there's a lot to achieve, and the health portfolio has many, many challenges attached to it, and will continue to have many, many challenges attached to it. And we will do our very, very best to give the new chief officer every support, and make sure that we're giving as much clarity around what we want politically to them and their department.
And then the final question, the obvious question, we're 2 years into your administration now. What can you point to as the successes of your government? Or indeed, are the cynics right who just say, well, it's all glitzy brochures and fine words, but action is still to be seen?
Well, I think, Phil, that look back over the last 2 years, and I think we've had everything, including the kitchen sink, thrown at us as an administration. We've led the exit from COVID. We've gone almost immediately from exiting COVID. And by the way, we were one of the very first people globally, if not certainly in the British Isles, to determine that we were going to self-test and find a different pathway through COVID. We've gone through the cost of living crisis, the Ukraine war effectively. We put in the support schemes, we froze the price, we capped the price of electricity. We've helped businesses through two very difficult periods, COVID and then the sort of cost of living crisis. We've put in place and the platforms for sort of future success now, with a lot of the strategic work that we've been undertaken. If we can get these announcements out in the next 6 to 8 weeks that I've indicated to you today in today's programme, then I know that we will have set out now the real core delivery programme, and then we can turn our attention to some of the other critical issues that are facing us and that still remain a challenge.
Well, I hope that having listened to this programme, listeners will be eagerly filling in their online applications to go to the conference, which is to take place on the 20th and 21st, I think, of September.
That's correct.
That was Chief Minister Alf Cannan. So what do you think? Has his administration been too slow to get started, or is it reasonable to take time to get your plans and policies in order? With just 3 years left, do you have confidence that the Cannan administration will deliver on the promises made at the last election? Let me know your thoughts on the programme by contacting Phil Gorn at manxradio.com, and get in touch if you have any ideas for future shows. Don't forget this programme is available as a podcast on Manx Radio's website. For now though, I'm Phil Gorn. Gorum, Mayos and Geisakrum. Thanks for listening.